Henry Bradford settled the lower, or what we call the lower portion, the northern end of it, from just below the, my mind went blank, Yanks Robbins' home place. From there to the mouth of Sandy was Henry Bradford's territory. From that line north to the Benton County line was settled by James Monroe Gray, a first cousin of Henry Bradford. He was known as Preacher Gray. Preacher Gray, I don't remember just when he died, I have known, but he lived to be quite an old man. Henry Bradford was killed in 1863, I believe it was, by an irritated neighbor for justifiable reasons. But he was my great-great-grandfather, but I didn't get to meet him. But I did hear quite a bit about him. After he died, they came in and laid off all the land that belonged to him, divided it among his 4 daughters, and it was said that they got 2,000 acres each, but they didn't, because the whole 23rd district here added up to a little better than 10,000 acres. So 5,000 acres would have been about all he'd have got out of it. But anyhow, they had quite a chunk of land. And my great-grandmother was one of his daughters. As I described the community, or felt like was a reasonable description of us, we were about 4 generations behind the rest of the country. We were still a little bit old-fashioned. For instance, we liked to eat. I mean, we were farmers. All of us was poor, but we did eat well because we grew everything that we ate, except at the store we bought salt, sugar, coffee, and flour. Everything else we grew. They liked to have big dinners. Lantern of a morning, and he fed the stock before it was daylight. By the time it was daylight, he was on the road to the river bottoms. Our farmland was always in the river bottoms, usually anywhere from 1.5 miles to 3 miles from our home. So he always got an early start. He never quit farming or never quit working in the field until dark, so he fed again after dark when he got home. They worked hard, but they all seemed to enjoy life. Life was kind of slow around here. They spent long hours working, but they just didn't seem to have the running over each other that we endure today. Everybody was kind of laid back. If you know what hoop cheese is, they were big round blocks of cheese about that thick with a big old chopper on it, sit on the counter, and you chopped you off a chunk of it, got your handful of crackers out of the barrel, and that could be your meal if you wanted. They did sell candy. We had licorice candy, we had broken stick candy, and the best I remember, that was about all, because I didn't have the money to buy candy anyhow. Ben lived down in the bottom. Most people, or no one lived in the bottom as far as I can remember. But earlier than my day, Ben Pinson did live down in the lower end towards Mouth Sandy. He built a house up on stilts, and he tied a boat to one of the stilts. And he had a 2-floor or a loft in his barn. He built a ramp up to that loft in the barn. When the spring rains came, the river bottoms would flood, and Ben would carry all of his animals up in the loft of the barn and fasten them up. He used the boat to get back and forth from the house to the barn. And that's the only person that I ever knew of that lived in the river bottoms because of the flooding. They were all the older men down here cussed a lot. Now, you hear of profanity and you hear of cursing. They didn't do that. They just flat cussed. And some of them was pretty prolific at it. Ben was coming along one day, and Charlie Harrington was baling hay with a stationary baler, and the mules had to go around and around the rig there to power the baler. And Charlie had an old mule named Mike, and I guess old Mike figured after a while he wasn't getting anywhere going around and around, so he balked. He quit. So Ben came up, and Charlie was whipping on him. Old Mike trying to get him started. Old Mike wouldn't budge. He would back up, but he wouldn't go forward. So Ben walked up to Charlie and said, let me speak to him. So Charlie told him, go ahead. Ben walked up in front of the old mule, grabbed him on the bridle on each side of his head, started shaking his head back and forth and calling his ancestors several things that the mule probably didn't appreciate. He got through, he stepped back away from the old mule and said, get up, Mike. Charlie swore that old Mike never balked again after that. And, I believe it was 1918, they passed some amendment that prohibited alcohol in any shape, form, or fashion, and that was the Prohibition era. That went on until 1933 when they finally changed their mind on that, because during that Prohibition era, it was just like the dope peddling today. The bootleggers and the moonshiners were getting rich, and everybody else was getting drunk, even though nobody was supposed to have any liquor. But to the people down here then, their daddies had made whiskey, run a still, and there was nothing wrong with it. They didn't like the idea of some lawman telling them they couldn't brew a little. So they would get back off the road, up a holler. They had you need water if you're going to run a still, you need water. One of the quickest ways to find water is don't go around the creek, because the law, I don't think we were ever bothered with federal agents. But anyhow, the law would know to look up the creeks. So they would hunt a place where the crawdads would build mounds of dirt up. Anywhere you can find a crawdad mound, if you'll dig down a little ways, you'll find water. And that's how they would locate their stills back in the hills. And we had four classes of people here in the community. One class, which was the majority of the people, they did not drink, they didn't make whiskey, they didn't bootleg any, they wouldn't have anything to do with whiskey. We had another class, which I never knew but one man in this particular class. He didn't touch whiskey, didn't have anything to do with it, but he'd furnish you the corn and the sugar for half of the profits. Then we had the ones that would run off a little batch on Saturday night and sit on the front pew at church Sunday morning. And then we had the regulars who made it, drank it, sold it, and didn't give a hoot who knew it. So we had a little bit of all of them. But the place was known for the moonshine. And the old 23rd had a bad name. I know my mother-in-law's mother gave her strict orders, you don't ever set your foot in the 23rd. So Pauline didn't. She waited till Kermit come across Sandy and she married him. And I don't guess her mama ever forgive her for it, I don't know. But they were good people, but there was an unwritten code in this country, and that is, my business is my business, your business is your business, and the twain shall never mix. And you left, stay out of other people's business. We had neighbors that made whiskey, but we never, we knew they made whiskey, but we never saw any sign of it or would have even known it had we not known that they had money when they went to Paris. That was a quick way to know whether they were moonshining or not. In the summertime, if they had money, they were moonshining. But if you might wonder how did you get by through the year without money, Miss Bonnie Weldon, Miss Bonnie Thomas, ran the little store. You could always go down to the store. Miss Bonnie would tell you whatever you needed, put it on the books. When the fall came, if you made enough cotton to pay off all your debt, you paid it off, no interest, you just paid off what you owed. If you didn't have enough to pay off, it stayed on the book, we'll look at it next year. So that's how we live. If you needed to borrow a quarter, you could go down to Miss Bonnie and she'd put that on the book. And a quarter was all you needed, because my dad would work at the sawmill from sun up to sundown back in the 30s for 25 cents a day. So it didn't take a lot of money. You could say anything about anybody that you wanted to say about them, good or bad, but always at the end you would say, bless their heart, and that made it all right. And if you went visiting, they would never tell you goodbye when you left, but when you left, wherever it was always, y'all come when you can.